Under CRPC 1973, examination of witnesses by police is recorded under Section 161 of CRPC 1973. B is the right answer. Which schedule of the Constitution deals with anti-defection provisions for legislators? The 10th schedule, inserted by the 52nd Constitutional Amendment in 1985, contains the anti-defection provisions disqualifying legislators who defect from their political parties. So the answer is 10th schedule. Choice D is the correct choice. Which section of CPC empowers civil courts to try all suits of a civil nature unless barred? Section 9 of the CPC mandates that civil courts shall have jurisdiction to try all suits of a civil nature unless their cognizance is expressly or impliedly barred by statute. Section 9 is the answer. Choice A is the correct choice. Under BNSS 2023, the time limit for delivering a judgment after conclusion of argument is Section 392 of the BNSS 2023 requires the judgment in every trial to be pronounced within 30 days of completion of arguments, extendable up to 45 days for recorded reasons, introducing a fresh statutory timeline absent in the old Criminal Procedure Code. 30 days extendable to 45 days. The power to issue writs is conferred upon a High Court under which article? Article 226 confers on every High Court a plenary writ jurisdiction to issue directions, orders, or writs not only for the enforcement of fundamental rights but also for any other purpose wider than the Supreme Court's writ jurisdiction under Article 32. C is the correct choice. Sahil files a suit. The same matter is already pending between the same parties elsewhere. Section 10 CPC requires Section 10 of the CPC bars a court from proceeding with the trial of any suit in which the matter is in issue is directly or substantially in issue in a previously instituted suit between the same parties and requires the latter suit to be stayed. D is the correct choice. Which section of BNS 2023 deals with the offence of Terrorist Act? Section 113 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 codifies the offences of Terrorist Act within general criminal law for the first time, mirroring the substance of corresponding UAPA provisions. Section 113, choice C is the correct choice. The Special Marriage Act 1954 requires the parties to give notice of intended marriage of Section 5 of the Special Marriage Act 1954 requires the parties to give a notice of intended marriage to the marriage officer at least 30 days in advance of the solemnization. 30 days. Choice B is the correct choice. The doctrine of res gestae under BSA 2023 finds expression in Section 6 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023 preserves the doctrine of res gestae, facts forming part of the same transaction as a fact in issue are themselves relevant even if not the fact in issue. Section 6 D is the correct choice. Anticipatory bail under BNSS 2023 is provided under which section? Section 482 of the BNSS 2023 provides for the grant of anticipatory bail by the High Court or Sessions Court to a person apprehending arrest, replacing Section 438 of the CRPC 1973. The doctrine of part performance is contained in which section of the Transfer of Property Act 1882? Section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 embodies the doctrine of part performance, protecting a transferee in possession under a written but unregistered contract of transfer from being dispossessed by the transferor. Section 53A is the correct choice. Under Article 368, a constitutional amendment requires special majority of both houses, meaning majority of total membership and 2/3 of those present and voting. B is the right choice. A temporary injunction may be granted by a civil court under Order 39, Rules 1 and 2 of the CPC empower the civil courts to grant temporary injunctions to preserve property in dispute or to restrain a party from causing injury pending the suit. A is the correct answer. A man intending only to teach Bharat a lesson slaps him. Bharat collapses and dies. A man is liable for causing death by negligence under Section 106. Where death is caused by a rash or negligent act not amounting to culpable homicide, Section 106 of the BNS 2023, successor to Section 304A of IPC, applies. Under the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, a daughter in a co-partnership has rights equal to a son by birth. Choice A is the correct choice. Under BSA 2023, fact in issue is defined in which section? Section 2 of the BSA 2023 is the definition section and defines key terms including fact, fact in issue, relevant, document, and evidence for the purposes of the Adhiniyam. So, section 2 is the right answer. Is the answer. A is the correct choice. Under BNSS 2023, audio, video, electronic recording of search and seizure is Section 105 of the BNSS 2023 makes audio, video, electronic recording of the conduct of search and seizure mandatory in order to ensure transparency and protect against allegations of planting or tampering. A is the correct choice. Section 73 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 deals with Section 73 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 codifies the rule in Hadley versus Baxendale entitling the aggrieved party to compensation for loss naturally arising from the breach or such as the parties knew at the time of contracting would result. Which article of the Constitution of India guarantees the right to constitutional remedies? Article 32, which Dr. Ambedkar called the heart and soul of the Constitution, guarantees the right to move the Supreme Court for the enforcement of fundamental rights through writs. D is the correct choice. Inherent powers of the civil code are saved by which section of the CPC? Section 151 of the CPC saves the inherent powers of the civil code to make such orders as may be necessary for the ends of justice or to prevent abuse of the process of the court. B is the right choice. Which section of BNS 2023 defines and punishes the offense of snatching? Section 304 carves out snatching as a distinct, newly codified offense with its own punishment separate from theft and robbery. So, Section 304 C is the right answer. The doctrine of factum valet under Hindu law means an act done becomes valid despite procedural defect. Factum valet. So, D is the correct choice. An act done becomes valid despite procedural defect. Sneha makes a statement to police while in custody admitting guilt. Under BSA 2023, the statement is Admissible only to extent it leads to discovery of fact. Choice B is the right choice. Admissible only to extent it leads to discovery. Sunita lodges an FIR. The police refused to register it. Her remedy under BNSS 2023 lies under Section 175(3) of the BNSS 2023 empowers a magistrate on a complaint by an aggrieved person whose FIR is not registered by the police to direct the registration and investigation of a cognizable offence after appropriate inquiry. Under the Transfer Property Act 1882, sale is defined in which sections? Which section? Section 54 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882 defines a sale as a transfer of ownership in exchange for a price paid or promised or part paid and part promised, and also stipulates the mode of effecting it. The directive principles of state policy are contained in which part of the Constitution? Part 4 of the Constitution, Articles 36 to 51, contains the directive principles of state policy. Part 4A is the correct choice. Seventh order of the CPC deals with which aspect of civil proceedings? The seventh order of CPC contains the rules governing the form, contents, particulars, return and rejection of a plaint, including the requirements of cause of action and jurisdictional particulars. C. Plaint is the correct choice. Under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, a complaint must ordinarily be filed within how many years? 2 years. Section 69 of the Consumer Protection Act 2019 prescribes the limitation period of 2 years from the date on which the cause of action arose for filing a complaint before the Consumer Commission. Under IPC 1860, Section 302 prescribed punishment for murder. Its corresponding BNS provision is Section 103 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 prescribes the punishment for the offense of murder. C is the right choice. Under Section 125 CRPC, maintenance can be claimed by wife, children, and parents unable to maintain themselves. So, choice C is the correct choice. Under BSA 2023, dying declarations are admissible under which section? Section 26 of the BSA 2023 deals with statements by persons who cannot be called as witnesses, including dying declarations corresponding to Section 32. So, Section 26 is the right choice. Under BNSS 2023, information in cognizable cases FIR is registered under which section? Section 173 of BNSS 2023 governs the registration of information relating to a cognizable offense corresponding to Section 154 of the CRPC. Section 173. A is the correct choice. Soham agrees to sell his car to Vikram for 3 lakh. Vikram pays advance. Soham refuses delivery. Vikram may claim after the Specific Relief Amendment Act 2018, specific performance has been made the general rule rather than a discretionary remedy. So, the buyer of identifiable goods is entitled to specific performance of the contract of sale. Which case recognizes the right to privacy as a fundamental right under Article 21? Case Puttaswamy versus Union of India. A is the correct choice. Section 89 of the CPC deals with Section 89 of the CPC, inserted by the 99 Amendment, mandates the court where elements of a settlement exist to refer the dispute to arbitration, conciliation, judicial settlement, including Lok Adalat or mediation. A is the right answer, is the right choice. Settlement of disputes outside of court. Under the Motor Vehicles Act 1988, no fault liability is provided under which section of the 2019 amendment? Section 164. B is the right answer. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, residential status of an individual is determined under which section? Section 6 of the Income Tax Act 1961 lays down the test for determining the residential status of an individual. Hindu undivided family, firm and company, which in turn governs the scope of taxable income. An appeal from an order of the State Bar Council Disciplinary Committee lies to the Bar Council of India. A is a correct choice. Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan, 1997, is a landmark bill primarily concerning sexual harassment of women at workplaces. A is the correct choice. Under the Industrial Disputes Act 1947, retrenchment is defined in which section? Section 200 of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 defines retrenchment as the termination by the employer of the service of a workman for any reason whatsoever, otherwise than as punishment by way of disciplinary action, with carved out exceptions. Section B 200. Under the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita 2023, the offence of murder is punishable under which section? Section 103 of Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita 2023 prescribes the punishment for the offence of murder. Under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, the minimum age of a bridegroom for valid marriage is Section 5.3 of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 prescribes the minimum age of 21 years for the bridegroom and 18 years for the bride at the time of marriage. So choice C is the correct choice. Under the Indian Evidence Act 1872, Section 65B prescribes conditions for admissibility of Section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act 1872, inserted by the IT Act 2000, prescribed the conditions and procedure, including the certificate requirement for admissibility of electronic records, as clarified in Anwar PV and Arjun Pandit Rao Kotkar. Which section of BNSS 2023 provides for trial in absentia of proclaimed offenders? Section 356 of the BNSS 2023 is a new provision that expressly permits trial in absentia of a proclaimed offender. Under the Specific Relief Act 1963, as amended in 2018, specific performance is now generally, after the Specific Relief Amendment Act 2018, specific performance has been made the general rule rather than a discretionary remedy. D is the correct choice. Article 14 of the Constitution embodies which two interrelated concepts? Article 14 embodies the twin Dacian and American constitutional concepts: equality before the law, no special privileges, and equal protection of the laws, equal treatment of equals, which together guarantee non-arbitrariness in state action. B is the correct choice. Under which section of the CPC is the doctrine of res judicata codified? Section 11 of the CPC codifies the doctrine of res judicata, barring courts from trying any suit or issue that has been finally decided between the same parties by a competent court. Section 11, choice D is the correct choice. Under Section 11 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, appointment of arbitrators is made by Section 11 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, as amended, empowers the Supreme Court for international commercial arbitration and the High Court for domestic arbitration. The principle of strict liability was first laid down in which English case? The rule in Rylance versus Fletcher, 1868, first established strict liability. The occupier who brings on his land and keeps there anything likely to do mischief, if it escapes, it's a prima facie liable for damage caused by its escape, subject to recognized exceptions. Under the Income Tax Act 1961, capital gains arising from transfer of a long-term capital asset are taxed under Section 45 of the Income Tax Act 1961 is a charging section for the capital gains, providing that any profits or gains arising from the transfer of a capital asset affected in the previous year are chargeable to income tax under the head capital gains. An advocate is prohibited under BCI rules from Rule 36 of Part 6, Chapter 2 of the Bar Council of India rules expressly prohibits an advocate from soliciting work or advertising directly or indirectly by circulars, advertisements, touts, or personal communications. B. Advertising or soliciting work. MC Mehta versus Union of India is a series of pill cases concerning chiefly MC Mehta versus Union of India is a continuing mandamus pill through which the Supreme Court has, in successive orders, addressed Ganga pollution, vehicular emissions in Delhi, hazardous industries, and other environmental concerns under Article 21, 48A, and 51A G. So, environmental protection. A is the right choice. The Code on Wages 2019 consolidates how many earlier central labor laws on wages? 4. The Code on Wages 2019 consolidates and rationalizes four central enactments: the Payment of Wages Act, Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Bonus Act, and Equal Remuneration Act of 1976. Under BNS 2023, cheating is punishable under which section, replacing erstwhile IPC section 420? Section 318 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 is a recodified provision dealing with cheating and dishonestly inducing delivery of property, replacing section 420 of the IPC 1860. Aarti and Rajesh, Hindus, marry within prohibited degrees without custom permitting it. Their marriage is void ab initio under section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act. Under the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam 2023, electronic records are permissible as primary evidence under Section 61. Section 61 of the BSA 2023 expressly recognizes electronic and digital records as admissible evidence with the same legal effect as paper records, treating them as primary evidence. C is the correct choice. Under CRPC 1973, a magistrate may take cognizance of an offence under which section? Section 190 of the CRPC 1973 enumerated the three modes by which a magistrate could take cognizance: 1. Upon a complaint, 2. Upon a police report, or 3. Upon his own knowledge or information. Choice B is the correct choice. Section 190. Under the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, dishonor of check for insufficiency of funds is punishable under Section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881 specifically criminalizes dishonor of a check on account of insufficiency of funds or because it exceeds the amount arranged to be paid, treating it as a quasi-criminal offense. Section 138. C is the correct choice. The basic structure doctrine was first laid down by the Supreme Court in which case? The basic structure doctrine was first propounded by the 13-judge bench in Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, 1973. Under Order 9, Rule 13 CPC, an ex parte decree may be set aside on which ground? Order 9, Rule 13 of the CPC empowers the defendant to apply for setting aside an ex parte decree on proving that summons was not duly served or that he was prevented by sufficient cause from appearing when the suit was called on for hearing. D. B. B. Sufficient cause for non-appearance. The doctrine of legitimate expectation in administrative law was elaborated by Indian courts in Union of India versus Hindustan Development Corporation. The doctrine of legitimate expectation as a facet of natural justice and judicial review of administrative action. The Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 was substantially amended in which year to expedite arbitration? The Arbitration Conciliation Amendment Act 2015 was the watershed amendment that introduced strict timelines, fast-track procedure, limited grounds for challenge, and a narrower public policy test to expedite arbitration in India. 2015 is when the amendment took place. C is the right choice. Under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the pecuniary jurisdiction of a district commission is up to 1 crore. Following the 2021 central government notification under the Consumer Protection Act 2019, the District Commission exercises pecuniary jurisdiction over consumer disputes where the value of goods or services paid does not exceed 1 crore. It's enhanced to 1 crore. Goods and services tax in India was introduced with effect from which date? GST was rolled out across India from July 1st, 2017, following enactment of the CGST, IGST, UTGST, and the Compensation Acts pursuant to the 101st Constitutional Amendment. So, July 1st, 2017, A is the correct choice. An advocate's duty towards the court includes which of the following under BCI rules? Section 2, Duties to the Court of Chapter 2, Part 6 of the BCI rules requires an advocate to maintain a respectful attitude towards the court and prohibits any attempt to influence the court's decision by illegal or improper means such as private communication. A is the correct choice. Public interest litigation in India was popularized primarily by which two judges of the Supreme Court? Pill jurisprudence in India was pioneered jointly by Justices P.N. Bhagavati and V.R. Krishna Iyer, who relaxed locus standi rules and developed epistolary jurisdiction to widen access to constitutional remedies. D is the correct answer. Under the 2013 Act, social impact assessment is generally required for acquisitions exceeding which threshold of affected families? Section 4 of the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Act 2013 makes a social impact assessment mandatory for all acquisitions with the exception thresholds for SIA and consent requirements to be prescribed by the rules made by the appropriate government. C. Under the Payment and Gratuity Act 1972, an employee become eligible for gratuity after continuous service of 5 years. Section 4.1 of the Payment of Gratuity Act 1972 provides that gratuity is payable to an employee on termination of employment after he has rendered continuous service of not less than 5 years. Under IPC 1860, Section 375 dealt with rape. The corresponding BNS provision is Section 63 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 defines and punishes the offence of rape corresponding to Section 375 of the IPC 1860 with the substantive changes already introduced after Nirbhaya. Section 63. Under the Trademarks Act 1999, registration of a trademark is initially valid for Section 25(1) of the Trademarks Act 1999 provides that the registration of a trademark shall be for a period of 10 years, renewable for further periods of 10 years on payment of the prescribed fee. B. 10 years. Section 13B of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 provides for Section 13B of the Hindu Marriage Act 1955, inserted by the 1976 amendment, enables both spouses to seek divorce by mutual consent on the ground that they have been living separately for at least 1 year and have agreed to dissolve the marriage. So C, divorce by mutual consent is a correct choice. Under the Indian Evidence Act, the burden of proof generally lies on Section 102 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 and Sections 106 BSA 2023 places the burden of proof on the party who would fail if no evidence were given on either side. A. The party who would fail if no evidence were given. The National Green Tribunal was established in India under the National Green Tribunal was established under the National Green Tribunal Act 2010 to provide effective and expeditious disposal of cases relating to environmental protection and conservation of forests and other natural resources. Choice D, National Green Tribunal Act 2010 is the right choice. The Information Technology Act 2000 was substantially amended in which year, introducing Section 66A, later struck down. In 2008. The Information Technology Amendment Act 2008 substantially overhauled the IT Act 2000 and inserted Section 66A penalizing offensive online messages, which was later struck down in Shreya Shingal versus Union of India 2015. Under BNSS 2023, the Sessions Court may pass any sentence authorized by law except Death sentence without High Court confirmation. Choice C. Death sentence without High Court confirmation. C is the right choice. Under the Indian Contract Act 1872, a void agreement is defined in which section? Section 2G of the Indian Contract Act 1872 defines a void agreement as one which is not enforceable by law, in contrast with a contract under Section 2H. So, Section 2G, that is choice A, is the correct choice. Under Article 21, the Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi held that procedure established by law must be. In Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India 1978, the Supreme Court held that procedure established by law under Article 21 must be just, fair, and reasonable, effectively reading due process into the Constitution. Under the Companies Act 2013, a one-person company is defined in which section? Section 262 of the Companies Act defines a one-person company as a company having only one person as a member, introduced for the first time in Indian company law. Under CPC, an appeal from an original decree, first appeal, is provided under Section 96 of the CPC 1908 confers the substantive right of first appeal from every original decree passed by a court exercising original jurisdiction. So, Section 96 is the answer. B is the right choice. Principles of natural justice require which two essential rules? The two cardinal rules of natural justice are Adi alterum partem, here the other side, and Nemo jurex in causa sua, no one shall be a judge in his own cause, the latter being the rule against bias. Section 89 of the CPC, read with Order 10, Rule 1A, refers parties in which alternative methods. Section 89 of the CPC, read with Order 10, Rule 1A, enumerates 4 modes of ADR: arbitration, conciliation, judicial settlement, including settlement through Lok Adalat, and mediation. The principle of absolute liability, distinctive from strict liability, was evolved in India in MC Mehta versus Union of India, oleum gas leak, 1987. The Supreme Court evolved the rule of absolute liability for enterprises engaged in hazardous activities dispensing with the exceptions to the strict liability rule in Rylance and Fletcher. Under GST law, an input tax credit claim is governed primarily by which section of the CGST Act 2017? Section 16 of the CGST Act 2017 lays down the eligibility and conditions for availing input tax credit, including possession of a tax invoice, actual receipt of goods or services, payment of tax, and filing of returns. Under the Advocates Act 1961, professional misconduct of an advocate is dealt with under Section 35 of the Advocates Act 1961 empowers the State Bar Council to take disciplinary action against an advocate found guilty of professional or other misconduct, with appeal lying to Bar Council of India. Locus standi in pill has been liberalized so that, following S.P. Gupta and Union of India 1981, the rule of locus standi has been liberalized so that any member of the public acting bona fide and having sufficient interest may approach the constitutional courts on behalf of those who cannot themselves seek redress. D is the correct choice. The Right to Fair Compensation Act governing land acquisition in India was enacted in the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act 2013 came into force in 2014, replacing the Colonial Land Acquisition Act of 1894. D is the correct choice. Section 25F of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 mandates which conditions before retrenchment? 25F of the Industrial Disputes Act 1947 lays down three mandatory preconditions for valid retrenchment of a workman in continuous service of 1 year: 1 month's notice or wages in lieu, payment of retrenchment compensation, and service of notice on the appropriate government. Organized crime is dealt with under which section of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023? Section 111 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023 introduces organized crime as a distinct codified offense in general criminal law for the first time, drawing from state enactments such as MCOCA. Under the Patents Act 1970, the term of a patent in India is Section 53 of the Patents Act 1970 provides that every patent granted in India shall be for a term of 20 years from the date of filing of the application, in compliance with the India's TRIPS obligations. Maintenance for a divorced Muslim woman is governed primarily by Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act 1986. The Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act 1986, enacted in the wake of Shah Bano controversy, primarily governs the right of a divorced Muslim woman to fair and reasonable provision and maintenance from her former husband during the iddat period and beyond. The presumption as to genuineness of electronic records is dealt with under which section of BSA 2023? Section 79A of the BSA 2023 introduces a presumption as to the genuineness of electronic or digital records produced from proper custody, modernizing and strengthening the evidentiary regime for digital evidence. Section 79A. B is the right answer. The polluter pays principle was applied by the Supreme Court in the polluter pays principle has been articulated and applied in all three landmark cases: MC Mehta versus Kamal Nath, Indian Council for Enviro Legal Action, and Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum, making all of the above correct. Section 66A of the IT Act 2000 was struck down as unconstitutional in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India 2015. The Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of the IT Act 2000 as unconstitutional for being vague, overbroad, and violative of Article 19(1)A. Under the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023, the maximum period of police custody is 60 days. Section 187 of the BNSS 2023 permits police custody to be granted in parts within the first 40 or 60 days of the total custody period, depending on the gravity of the offence, liberalizing the earlier 15-day window under Section 167 CRPC. An agreement in restraint of trade is generally void under which section of the Contract Act? Section 27 of the Indian Contract Act 1872, declares every agreement by which any person is restrained from exercising a lawful profession, trade, or business to be void, save for the statutory exception relating to sale of goodwill. Under Article 356, President's rule in a state can be initially imposed for a maximum period of 6 months. Article 356(4) provides that a proclamation of President's rule after parliamentary approval remains in force for 6 months at a time extendable up to a maximum of 3 years on prescribed conditions. Under the Companies Act 2013, the minimum number of directors in a public company is 3. The provision for return of plaint for presentation to proper court is contained in Order 7, Rule 10 of the CPC provides that a plaint shall, at any stage of the suit, be returned to be presented in the court in which the suit should have been instituted, where the court finds that it has no jurisdiction to try it. The Wednesbury principle of unreasonableness was applied by Indian courts in the Tata Cellular versus Union of India. The Supreme Court adopted the Wednesbury principle as the standard of judicial review of administrative action. Courts will interfere only if the decision is so unreasonable that no reasonable authority could ever have come to it. Wednesbury principle. An arbitral award must be set aside on grounds specified under which section of 1996 Act? Section 34 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 sets out the limited ground and procedure for challenging and setting aside a domestic arbitral award. B is the correct choice.